A flight attendant, without a moment's hesitation, tore up a 12-year-old boy's boarding pass. What she didn't know was that his father owned the entire airline. Tarek Delancey had never traveled alone before. At 12, he was considered old enough by airline policy and his father's judgment, but that didn't stop a nervous sweat from forming on his palms as he gripped his ticket. The straps of his backpack were a familiar weight on his shoulders. Inside were his essential supplies: snacks, a sketchbook, headphones, and a note from his mother. "Find a window seat and look at the mountains," she had written. "It'll feel like you're soaring over a masterpiece." He read the line again and again. His destination was Seattle, where he would attend a 2-week robotics camp his dad had helped fund. He was the only kid from his school attending, and the look of pride on his mother's face that morning was a vivid memory. Tarek had followed every rule, checked in early, found his gate, and waited in line patiently. Other passengers passed through the gate agent's scanner without issue, but when it was his turn, the atmosphere changed. The agent, a woman in a sharp navy blazer, wore a mismatched red lipstick and an air of self-importance. Her name tag identified her as Colleen Dresner. She glanced at Tarek but not at his ticket. "Are you lost?" she asked. "No," Tarek replied, his voice steady. "I'm boarding Flight 262 to Seattle." She didn't reach for the scanner or check her monitor. She simply tilted her head. "Where are your parents?" "I'm flying solo," he said, offering his printed confirmation. "My dad went ahead." That's when she let out a long theatrical sigh. "We can't have children just roaming around here unsupervised." "I'm not roaming," Tarek insisted, holding out the ticket again. "It's right here." Instead of taking it, she took the paper between 2 fingers, scanned it for a mere second, and without a word ripped it down the middle. Tarek's mouth fell open and he could only stare at the 2 torn pieces in her hand. "There," she said flatly. "You'll wait here while we sort out who you really are. I've seen enough fake passes in my career to know a bad one." The room seemed to spin. People behind him looked confused, exchanging glances, but no one spoke. "I didn't do anything," Tarek mumbled, his voice beginning to tremble. "You're being a nuisance now," Colleen snapped. "Don't make this more difficult." The word nuisance rang in his ears. He looked around, hoping someone would intervene. The other passengers, the gate staff, even the security officer leaning against the wall. But it was as if he had disappeared. Colleen waved at a younger attendant with a headset. "Call someone from TSA. We may have a situation." That's when fear began to creep in. Not of flying, but of this, being trapped in public, singled out and belittled in front of strangers for no reason. This wasn't a mistake. It was a dismissal. His hand instinctively closed around his mother's note in his pocket. He didn't pull it out, he just held it like a secret. No one moved. The terminal noises continued. The rumble of bags, a baby's cry, a businessman typing on his laptop. Tarek stood there, clutching the torn paper, unsure whether to sit or stand. His eyes were starting to sting. The younger flight attendant, named Ryan, shifted uncomfortably as if he wanted to speak up but couldn't. Meanwhile, Colleen acted as though she had just thwarted a major security threat instead of humiliating a child. Tarek tried again. "Ma'am, if you just scan my name, my dad's already on the plane. His name is Benson Delancey." She paused, a flicker of recognition crossing her face, but it vanished quickly. "I don't care whose name you drop. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know when something's not right." "I'm not lying about anything," Tarek said. "You're being defiant," she replied. "Do you want to escalate this?" He remained silent. The TSA officer finally arrived. A stocky man in his 50s chewing gum, wearing mirrored sunglasses indoors. "What's the situation?" he asked. "Possible fake ticket," Colleen reported. "Claims he's flying alone, no ID, getting mouthy with staff." The officer raised an eyebrow at Tarek. "You got a guardian here, kid?" "My dad's on the plane already," Tarek said. "Name?" "Tarek Delancey." The officer pulled out a tablet and typed for a few seconds. He looked at Colleen. "We have a Delancey on the manifest. 2 of them, actually. Benson Delancey checked in about 30 minutes ago, and the minor was confirmed for service." "Unaccompanied minor?" Colleen asked, her expression confused. "Correct," he said bluntly. "The system is clean. He's legitimate." Colleen's jaw tightened. She stood with her arms crossed as if the facts were an insult to her judgment. The officer turned to Tarek. "You okay, kid?" Tarek nodded, not wanting to admit how shaken he was. "All good here," the officer muttered, stepping back. "Looks like someone jumped the gun." But Colleen wasn't giving up easily. "He still shouldn't have approached the gate alone. There are procedures." "No," Ryan interrupted, his voice low but clear. "He followed the rules. I checked him and myself at the front desk an hour ago. I verified his ID and everything." Colleen shot him a sharp glare, but Ryan didn't back down. Something shifted in the way people were watching. A woman in her late 30s spoke up from her seat. "I saw the whole thing. He had his ticket out. He didn't do anything wrong." "Yeah, this doesn't seem right," another passenger murmured. The facade was crumbling. Tarek looked around, still holding the remains of his ticket. He didn't want a scene or revenge. He just wanted someone to acknowledge what had happened and that it wasn't okay. Ryan tapped his earpiece. "We need a supervisor at gate C12 immediately." Colleen said nothing, standing stiffly, her lips a tight line. Tarek stepped back, silent, too exhausted to argue. The silence no longer felt heavy. It felt like a space was opening up. But before anyone could say more, a voice cut through the tension from behind the security barrier. Calm and in control, it asked, "Is there a reason my son is not on that plane?" Every head turned. He wasn't a towering figure or loud, but Benson Delancey didn't need to be. He walked with quiet authority, shoulders relaxed, eyes unwavering. He wore a simple slate gray jacket over a white shirt. No one would have guessed his wealth just by looking at him. Except Ryan, whose eyes widened. "Mr. Delancey, sir, I thought you had already boarded?" "I stayed behind to observe," Benson said. "We've had staff complaints on this route. I wanted to see it for myself. And it looks like I saw more than I expected." Colleen shifted on her heels. "I wasn't aware you weren't supposed to be," he cut in politely but firmly. Tarek walked toward his father, finally letting out the breath he'd been holding. "Dad, you all right?" Benson asked. Tarek nodded faintly. "She said I had a fake ticket and tore it up." Benson didn't flinch. He turned to Colleen. "Did you scan his name?" Well, I didn't get that far." "Did you check the list?" he continued. "The tag on his backpack has a barcode that links to his manifest." "I didn't think I needed to." "You didn't think," Benson repeated, his voice still calm. "You assumed." Colleen's cheeks flushed, but she remained motionless. Ryan spoke up again, his voice a little stronger. "He was checked in correctly. I verified his unaccompanied minor status myself. The system showed no issues." Benson nodded. "Then why was his ticket destroyed?" Colleen's mouth opened and closed. "I'd like a supervisor here now," Benson said, still not raising his voice. "And I'd like this entire interaction reviewed on the gate security feed, from the moment my son was stopped to the exact time his boarding pass was destroyed." Ryan tapped his headset. "Already on it, sir." The woman who had spoken up earlier approached. "I saw the whole thing," she said. "Your son was polite. He showed his pass and she didn't even look at it." Benson gave her a small nod. "Thank you." Colleen's arms dropped to her sides. She looked smaller now. "I didn't know who he was," she said, clutching for an excuse. "That's the problem," Benson replied. "It shouldn't have mattered who he was." A heavy silence fell. A supervisor appeared moments later, walking briskly. "Mr. Delancey, my apologies for the delay. We've just been informed of the issue." "I want a report filed," Benson said. "And I want assurance that my son boards without further interference." "Yes, of course. He's cleared to board. We'll issue a new ticket immediately," the supervisor assured him. Tarek said nothing, still staring at the scraps of paper. Benson gently touched his shoulder. "You good to fly?" Tarek nodded, his voice a whisper. "I just don't get why she looked at me like that." Benson didn't answer right away. He looked at his son, then back at Colleen. She saw what she wanted to see, not what was there. The supervisor cleared his throat. "Mr. Delancey, would you like us to handle this internally or—" "I'll file my own report," Benson said. "I'm not here for drama. I'm here for accountability." The words hung in the air, sharp but not cruel. Tarek stood near the window as a new gate agent scrambled to reprint his pass. Benson remained in the center of the commotion. Colleen had retreated behind the counter, pretending to check seating charts. Benson walked over to her. "You didn't just rip up a boarding pass," he said calmly. "You ripped up a moment my son had been anticipating for weeks." Colleen's hand froze on the keyboard. "I made a judgment call." "No," he corrected. "You made a judgment. Full stop." She slowly turned to him, her mouth tight. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm pointing out something that happened," Benson said. "You made a decision about my son the second you saw him, before he spoke, before you did your job." She crossed her arms again. "I was protecting the integrity of the flight. We're trained to spot inconsistencies." "And your inconsistency was?" he asked. "A child standing in line with a valid ticket, waiting his turn?" Colleen looked like she wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to defend. The security footage was already flagged. Ryan had made sure of that. The supervisor stood nearby, listening. "You know what the worst part is?" Benson continued. "You didn't think twice about it, not until you realized who I was. And even then you weren't sorry. You were just scrambling." Her face flushed again. "I didn't mean to, but you did," he said. "You made my son feel like a threat, a problem to be dealt with. And no amount of customer service training can undo that." For a second, Colleen looked like she might speak, then she stopped. Sometimes silence is the only honest response. Benson stepped back, giving her space to process her actions. Ryan walked up beside him. "Mr. Delancey," he said quietly, "your son's new pass is ready. First-class upgrade, no charge." "Thank you," Benson said. "Not for the upgrade, but for speaking up earlier. That took courage." Ryan gave a quick nod and returned to the desk. Tarek rejoined his father, his eyes steadier now. "Do I really have to sit up front? I like the wing seats better." Benson smiled. "We can trade if you want." The supervisor cleared his throat. "Mr. Delancey, I want to personally apologize. This is not what we stand for." "I hope not," Benson said. "But I'll be watching." The supervisor nodded, his expression serious. "We'll handle it from here." As they walked toward the jet bridge, what lingered wasn't the conversation but what hadn't been said. The silence of those who had seen and chosen comfort over courage. Inside the plane, the flight crew had already been briefed. A woman with warm eyes and steady hands greeted them. "Mr. Delancey, we're so sorry about what happened at the gate. Your seats are ready, and Tarek, if you'd like to visit the cockpit before takeoff, we'd be happy to show you around." Tarek's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" she smiled. "The captain's a big fan of your dad." Benson placed a hand on his son's back. "Go on. I'll be right here." As Tarek followed the attendant, Benson watched him, a mix of pride and a familiar ache. He had grown used to seeing these situations, but it never stopped hurting when it affected his own family. He sat down in seat 2A, pulled out his phone and typed a message to his chief of staff. "Gate agent at Sacramento Terminal C-12. Incident involving unaccompanied minor. Security footage flagged. Request internal review and retraining evaluation. I'll handle the report. This one's personal." He hit send, leaned back and watched the jet bridge pull away. In the terminal, the aftermath had begun. Dean Rossner, the supervisor, stood with Ryan, who was now off duty but had stayed behind. Colleen remained at her post, silent, staring at the screen. "You understand what's coming, right?" Dean said quietly. She didn't look up. "Disciplinary review at the very least." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't mean, I know what you meant," he said. "But meaning and doing are two different things. You acted without cause. You singled out a child, ignored protocol, and now we have a fire from the top. You have a file now, Colleen. A serious one." She said nothing, but the weight of it was sinking in. Ryan, arms crossed, spoke without smugness. "You could have handled it differently. You had the info. You just didn't care." Colleen finally snapped, her voice low and sharp. "Don't pretend you've never missed something." "I have," Ryan replied. "But I've never shredded a kid's ticket because he didn't look how I expected him to." Dean cut in. "All right, that's enough. HR will handle the rest." Ryan took a breath and left. On the plane, Tarek returned from the cockpit, a small smile on his face. "Dad, they said I could press one of the buttons before we take off." Benson raised an eyebrow. "Did you ask what it did first?" "I'm not trying to launch the cargo door mid-flight." Tarek grinned and Benson laughed. For the first time that day it felt real. Minutes later, as the plane taxied, Tarek turned in his seat. Are you mad at her? Benson paused. No. Why not? Because getting angry is easy, he said. Making sure it never happens again? That's harder. That's the real work. Tarek leaned back silent. She looked at me like I didn't belong. I know. And you're not supposed to feel that way. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his mom's note, creased from his grip. Still going to look for the mountains? Tarek mumbled. You'll see them, Benson said. And a lot more. Just don't ever let someone like her make you question if you belong in the seat you've earned. Tarek nodded. As the plane lifted into the sky, Benson knew the conversation wasn't over. The system that allowed this to happen wasn't just at the gate. It was everywhere. When the plane leveled out above the clouds, the city below was a quilt of light and shadow. Tarek leaned his forehead against the window. I think I see snow on the mountains. Benson glanced over. Could be Mount Shasta. Looks like powdered sugar. They chuckled quietly. The tension hadn't vanished, but at this altitude they could finally breathe. The flight was smooth, filled with the usual sounds of rustling newspapers and headphones. A different flight attendant, Sharon, approached with 2 glasses of water and a folded note. This was passed from the gate supervisor, she whispered. Benson unfolded it. Mr. Delancey, we're reviewing all recent gate interactions across terminals starting tomorrow. I know a formal apology isn't enough, but we'll do better. Dean Rossner. He folded the note slowly and slid it into his pocket. Across the aisle, an older man leaned over. That your boy? He is, Benson said. He handled himself real calm back there. Most kids would have lost it. He's been taught not to, Benson replied. The man nodded knowingly. Kids like him, they have to be twice as patient, huh? Benson didn't answer right away. Twice as patient. 3 times as careful. And still things happen. The man didn't say another word. Tarek yawned. Will they fire her? I don't know, Benson replied. Do you want them to? No, Tarek said. I want them to understand why it matters. People don't learn when you just erase them. They learn when they're forced to see what they couldn't before. Tarek opened his sketchbook and began to draw mountains, clouds, and a plane slicing through the sky. You think she'll remember this? I think it will follow her, Benson said. Good. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It held understanding. When they landed in Seattle, an airport staff member waited with a sign. As they exited, Benson put a hand on his son's shoulder. I'll see you in 2 weeks. You flying out to pick me up? Wouldn't miss it. Tarek grinned. Sharon smiled at them. Have a great camp, young man. Thanks, Tarek said, then looked at Benson. Love you. Love you too. As he watched his son disappear into the terminal, Benson felt the weight of the day settle. Not in a crushing way, but as a reminder of why he built this airline. For some, flying was just transportation, but for others, it was a test, where silence allowed things to rot and even the skies weren't neutral. But the right thing doesn't stop being right just because it's inconvenient. 2 days later, Benson sat in his Oakland office, rereading an email from Dean Rossner. Mr. Delancey, Colleen Dresner has been placed on administrative leave. As per your recommendation, we are launching a system-wide training initiative focused on bias recognition and youth passenger engagement. I appreciate your restraint and your reminder that accountability is more than punishment. Sincerely, Dean. He closed the email. There was no joy but a quiet resolve. His assistant knocked. Your 2:30 with the legal team is here, and a voicemail from Sacramento. A woman named Colleen Dresner wants a meeting with you. Benson sighed. Schedule it for next week. 10 minutes, no longer. When she left, he took the 2 torn halves of Tarek's boarding pass from his pocket. He'd kept them as a reminder, a paper-thin piece of evidence with a heavy meaning. That evening, Tarek called from camp. They let us build drones today. Mine flew straight into a tree. Benson chuckled. At least it took off. Yeah. There's this other kid from Texas. He asked me what I want to be when I grow up. I told him I don't know, and he said, you look like you're gonna run stuff one day. Benson smiled. He's not wrong. I didn't feel like that at the airport. I know, Benson said softly. But one day maybe someone will see you, and instead of making assumptions, they'll remember your name. Not because of what I built, but because of who you are. Tarek was quiet. I drew her, by the way. Who? The woman from the gate. I drew her face, not mean or anything, just regular. I put her behind a desk and wrote the words, "Do better," on the glass window. That's a good drawing, Benson said. Yeah. I think I'll keep it. They said their goodnights. Benson sat in the dark office for a while. What had happened at the gate wasn't rare. It was a pattern. But patterns can be broken. Not with noise but with action. With naming things when it's easier to let them slide. With raising a son who knew how to stay composed when the ground shifted beneath him. Not everyone has the luxury of a father in a first-class lounge. And that's why silence isn't an option. If this story resonated, share it, not for views but for awareness. For accountability. For every kid just trying to get to their seat without being treated like a problem.